Well, hello, friends. I am so happy to be joined by my friend Justine González today here. She is going to be talking to us about the work that she does in the world of education. And it's all about helping educators become, as she says, healthier, wealthier, and making their lives easier. So we're going to learn more about that. Justine, welcome to our conversation.
Hi, Dean. I'm so glad to be here with you, and I'm just glad to sit in space and share.
Let's dive into it. Tell us about the work that you do in the world of education. What are some of the things that you tackle, and walk us through some of that work that you do.
Yeah, so work. I like to steal from one of my favorite mentors' phrases. He always said, whether he's been like a deputy superintendent, no matter what, he would always say, I'm just a teacher disguised as a principal, superintendent, bus driver, whatever the hat is. So, one of the things I always say is it's really cool to work in education because it's a profession where often we learn a lot of transferable skills. So my journey has looked like a lot of cool experiences. I started teaching at 21, and from there, I've held a lot of different roles pretty quickly in my career. Then experienced some burnout as a teacher in the K-12 public education system. Go figure, it happens. And a lot of my work then has led to my consulting firm, Educator Aide, and being able to support a multitude of districts nationally for the past almost 8 years. And what we really try to help people do is understand how they connect and communicate within their teams. Some of the outcomes that we're typically called on for have to do with employee engagement, teacher retention, attracting talent to your school district. And so we do a lot of problem solving around what are the people telling you, the teachers' voices, the students' voices. How are we actually looking at what people are saying they experience in our district? And then are we creating healthy systems of accountability as well as equitable and inclusive practices that really help us achieve our strategic goals? So there's obviously a lot of things that could go into that, but at the heart of it all, we want to help educators have lives that are easier, healthier, and wealthier. We multitude of ways and programs that we work with K-12 districts and school leaders. But that's it in a nutshell, is just
Hmm.
realizing so many of my own mistakes as a teacher, so much of that burnout was brought on by myself.
Mhm.
And how do we start to maybe reframe, even as K-12 teachers and principals and superintendents, how do we even reframe our perspective of the work, so
Mm.
that we stay in the work for the right reasons that most of us got into it, which is kids and serving future generations.
Yeah, I mean, such a purposeful world, and yet fraught with, in your words, burnout. Let's explore that from your experience. You said something interesting that you realized as you stepped away from it, that you brought a bit of the burnout onto yourself. How does that happen? Because I know for teachers, they're pulled in a thousand directions.
Yeah.
Um, Walk us through some of that. Some of the conceptions people have and this world of burnout.
Yeah, I think, well, one of the first, and I just want to put this out there because it's one that comes up a lot. And I think my K-12 people who see this will understand. There's often a misconception that, well, teachers, you get summers off, you
Mhm.
get holiday breaks with your children if you have them. And so there's already this kind of theory and perception, at least in the United States context that I'm talking about, that teachers, they have this amazing job, which we do, but we get time off. And so often we tell ourselves, because the work is so missional, I think this is what happened with me personally, but I hear it happen a lot when I do empathy interviews with people and stuff, is I would tell myself, but you are here to serve little humans. And so regardless of how little you are paid, whether it is overtime, after school time, small paycheck to begin with, it's one of those professions where you know that you have an impact and you do know you make a difference. Even if it's whether it's labeled as positive or negative, you're going to have kids you click with, some that you don't click with as much, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, we I think most educators, we hold that in high responsibility. I definitely know that my personality leans into that. I really believe in wanting to serve the youth of our next generations. So then when you tell yourself that, you are often more apt to be utilized. Oh, well, Justine can do it. She stayed last time. She said she doesn't have anything on this night. And then you find yourself saying, well, it's for the kids though, so I'll do it.
Mm.
So it's kind of this perfect storm of a system that was never designed, like our system in the States, something important for people to understand, it was designed to actually recruit people for the military and for the labor workforce. Our standardized tests in theory that are still taken 100 years, almost 100 years later, they hit the scene in the 30s and 40s to actually handpick people for the military. So because we're also working in systems that might be older, that's not just K-12, that causes a lot of friction and conflict because you might have policymakers who dictate pay scales or what your per pupil budget should be. Every student is worth a dollar amount. That's already, right? We've applied business principles, capitalism principles to something that is in the business of serving children. So I think a lot of that conflict comes because then we have what I call teacher guilt. Oh, I should stay after and do that because Johnny really needs that. It doesn't matter then if I'm missing a doctor's appointment I had on the calendar for 6 months. So there is definitely, that's not everybody, but I do know many of us fall into, but I'm okay. This baby's only 5 and I want to help. So I
Mhm.
think that the burnout comes from a genuine passion. I think it comes from then us going into classroom often not knowing our value and being reminded with a paycheck of what our value isn't. And then I think the third thing is, do we have the support of an environment and system that supports us? So then a lot of that success is contingent upon who is coaching you. So when you go into that classroom, are you going to feel alone? And when you do have issues, which we all do, you're going to have learning curves. You're managing 30 to 35 little personalities or more every day. You often then don't realize how much you're abandoning yourself all the time. So whether then you even have a family at home, that's a whole other level, right? So I think for me personally, I also opted out and I see other young teachers do this. And if you hear it, please don't. And I would say, oh, well, I'm not married and I don't have kids. And I would automatically diminish myself and volunteer for stuff and not understand how to manage my own energy. So
Mm.
I think a lot of it comes from just being overwhelmed and then not having adequate systems in place for us to know, or even have people who hold us accountable and say, Justine, you're on like 5 committees. You shouldn't be doing that. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Mhm. And I would imagine, and while it's acute in education, it's not unique. And I've seen those same
Oh,
human patterns,
yes.
whether it's in nonprofits or medicine, but even in entrepreneurs or businesses that are focused on customer service. I've seen customer service people give and give and give to the point where they feel like the only way out is out. And we tend to paint ourselves into that box. And a lot of it seems like what I'm hearing you say is like there's a boundaries challenge. You know, how do we manage boundaries without being, feeling like we're always saying no? And so that's really powerful work, because we know in the world of education we need great educators. Like,
Yeah, that's not going away. We can get mad at a system all we want, a system that was already broken, but there's still that humanness every day. There's going to be babies born. There's going to be education system of some sort.
hmm hmm yeah. So um, changing angles here slightly. So the work that you're doing, you said you're supporting these school systems, and that's some coaching, some workshop type work and things like that. But you're more and more finding yourself on stage. Tell us about some of your transition here as you find yourself speaking to groups more and more.
Yes. So, well, first of all, I'll give a shout out to you and to NSA Illinois. I went through Speakers Academy. Woo woo. And that was just a great start to it. I have been kind of dabbling with getting into more speaking. I've felt comfortable facilitating for years because as a teacher, you often end up facilitating from early on. And I always did that kind of stuff as in my different school-based roles. So I started thinking about, okay, but when you think about impact, when you think about influence, Justine, how do you also get that message to people who, what if somewhere in a one stoplight town or in Miami or wherever, I like all different types of settings personally. So I like to work with different types of groups from different, whether it's suburban, urban, or rural. Um, but I say all that to say, I started thinking about, okay, but you're one person. And also, if other groups are saying this workshop was impactful, but you're also saying you only accept 12 people, or you only are doing it with this district because they contract you, you're also cutting people off from hearing that message. And so one of the things was just looking into how, like practically as a business person, how do I start to monetize different revenue streams, but also how do I actually speak to more people than just what's in my client portfolio, essentially, as a business owner. So I started the journey of just learning more about the art and business of public speaking, which is why I started with Speakers Academy and joining. And then really the past, all of 2024 has looked like putting feelers out and doing a lot of reaching out, connecting with others who I know are good referral partners for me and like over the years, and honestly doing a lot of my own research. And I don't mean Chat GPT. I don't even mean Google. I mean, I have spent significant time just going through all the different types of education association websites, going through all the different conferences, what are the parameters for applying for those and all of that. So for me right now, I feel like I'm really learning. I'm still very much learning how to continue to get in front of different groups. And right now I've taken the opportunity to do a lot of lower paid and free things, partly because in my industry, K-12, that's typically how a lot of speaking is, not always, but a lot of conferences are angled that way. So for me, the other caveat was I spent a while before I got in front of people again. I tell people my most important keynote was my mom's eulogy 2.5 years ago. And so in this time period, I only add that caveat for people because I do think timing is important. And I knew myself and I knew that I need learning and I need space, but I also needed to feel comfortable. So part of me also taking that angle, I'm not telling anybody you should have to do things for free, but part of that is me, knowing my industry, and knowing if these opportunities are presenting, that's a learning opportunity. So just being very specific about different arenas I want to try to get in.
Yeah.
That's
So
what a lot of my year has looked like.
yeah, I like it. And what I'm hearing is there's an intentionality. And so sometimes we can, as we're moving into, let's say, the speaking world, uh, there's this kind of mystery of, okay, how do I get paid to speak? And I went through Speakers Academy several years too, and it was very formative for me at that time. It's like giving me an understanding of what's on the other side of this curtain and what does that look like. And there's a handful of principles that just continue to resonate with me. And one of them is, if you want to speak more, speak more. And there's an intentionality that I'm hearing from you that I'm going to get out there and I'm going to work on the ideas and I'm going to meet people and I'm going to master, this skill in service of my audience. Right. So there's an intentionality of that. And eventually it parlays and turns into something in and of itself. And another principle that I remember is there's many ways to get paid. And sometimes the way we get paid for speaking, especially early in our journey, isn't necessarily with a check. There's other things that
Yeah.
this connects to in the work that we're doing and how we're serving our audience.
Yeah. A quick little, just like story analogy, so to speak. One of the other assets that goes with that, actually, this journey was for me a health aspect. My health was not the greatest, especially following my mother's death. That was another factor. And I put this out there for people because when I started, and I have been watching myself back on video, I host a podcast, but when you really start putting yourself out there, you do full body video of yourself and stuff. I've also known 2024 has been a year to focus on my health. So I
Mm,
put that caveat, not because anybody needs to feel a certain way. I'm big on body positivity. I love myself. And I knew I wasn't my healthiest, and I didn't like how I looked. I didn't like how I
mhm,
looked when I was watching some of my video back. So part of this is very intentional and even aligns with my mission to help educators be lives be easier, healthier, and wealthier. Of I want to accomplish these certain goals. So I feel really good when I travel internationally. I don't feel out of breath when I'm making my point and getting excited and then laughing on stage. Like these are tangible, real things that I think sometimes we're afraid to say to one another, or we think there's stigma. And the reality is, if I didn't feel my best, am I really going to come on stage my best, Dean?
mm,
No.
mhm,
And so my little story to go with
mhm,
that is it's very simple, like you said, with the reps for just picture. I took multiple rounds of swim lessons as a kid because I was terrified. I recently, and part of this health journey this year, has been finding a gym that has a swimming pool. That was important for me to not hit a plateau. And I realized in the first time, Dean, the way I was breathing was totally different. And
mm,
it took me straight back to childhood and being terrified. And
mhm,
it actually made me more aware of my breathing and speaking. And again, behind the curtain, in speaking, how you breathe and speak is really important. And I know I
mhm,
struggle with anxiety, and those of us who struggle with that, we just want to fill up space. So,
mm,
so I say all that to connect it to one other important thing, which is I think knowing our capacities for whatever moment we happen to be in. I like the power of right now because it's right now. So not saying, but 20 years ago I looked this way.
mhm,
Okay. Okay, but next year if I do this, I'll look the
mhm,
where are you right now and how do you want to feel and how do you want to be?
mhm, mhm. Powerful. And I read one time that the fastest path of personal development is to work for yourself. I'm not saying everybody should work for themselves, but the reality is you can't hide,
No.
whether it's emotionally, mentally, cognitively, physically. You have to confront yourself. And so, I've experienced those things that you just shared. From a health standpoint, it's like I gotta get healthier, and I can't hide. So great, inspiring story for us, and it's so exciting for hearing about the work that you're doing, because it's so important for certainly the future of our society and for future generations, and a lot of the work that you're doing, you'll not directly see the impact of, right? I mean, you're sending this out into the world, and knowing that it's making positive dents. So let's kind of bring the oars in here, and you have a podcast, and
Mm,
you have an online presence. Hit
mhm.
us with, if people want to learn more about your podcast, some of your presence, tell us where to go.
Yeah. So my podcast is called Love Learning You, and we are on all the channels. So if you like Apple or you listen to just Audible, etc., that we're on all those. And then YouTube is also where you can follow at Love Learning You. So all of our video episodes are there. Dean is in one, and we've come a long way. I think that's the thing. I am definitely not a person who's afraid of taking risks or staying committed to the continuous improvement process. And I would say that's just another thing to remember is if you're considering speaking, or you're a teacher or principal who sees this and you're wanting to get healthier or wealthier or make your life easier, you just have to start someplace and just take it a step at a time. I feel like that seems so simple, but I have made things very difficult at times. And I think that does come from overwhelm and burnout and anxiety. And, it's those tough conversations in the mirror of like, ah, but you guys just saw the types of conversations I had with myself. But yeah, that's where I like to hang out. If you'd like to connect on LinkedIn, just Justine González. You can look me up. I would love to connect. But yeah, that we've got a lot of different things going, but I would say I love my featured voices episodes on our podcast because I do get to sit and learn from different experts all around the world. So selfishly, I love my own podcast guests. That's the best kind. But yeah, that's where I like to hang out, and I'm just excited anytime I see, especially like our colleagues in NSA, just out there, man, making an impact and doing what they love, and just even being part of a community has changed how I view speaking. I have a lot more to learn. I've learned a lot, but I have so much more I can learn, and I'm excited to continue learning because that is how we grow the fastest, is being in community and seeing models and examples. Otherwise, I'm just out here trying to do it on my own, and
Mm.
that is necessary. So so I always appreciate having NSA community as well, and just cheering our colleagues on, because it is, speaking isn't for the faint of heart.
Always a pleasure, Justine. I'm so happy for you to share the story with us and to call you a friend. And thank you so much for being a part of this and sharing your story. And anybody watching, make sure you connect with Justine. So have a great day, Justine. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Take care.